All right, hello everyone. We're going to work through the study guide here and go through each of the questions, especially focusing on the questions where you have to work through a specific Turing machine. Okay, and you can use this to help verify your answers on the study guide and to help yourself do a little bit better on the test that's coming up. Okay, so let's get right into it. The first question asks, what are the basic differences between a DFA and a Turing machine? Okay, so let's write it out here. So briefly, a DFA and a Turing machine, they both have states, right? And they both have state transitions. So that's what they have in common. And they can both be used to solve decision problems. Okay, but you know that what makes a Turing machine different is that it also has a memory tape. This is probably the key difference. Okay, also it's important to understand that a Turing machine models a general purpose computer. Okay, a DFA, on the other hand, doesn't have a memory tape, and it doesn't model a general purpose computer, but it does model a regular expression. So what a DFA decides is whether a given set of symbols or whether a given string matches a regular expression or doesn't match a regular expression. Also, another interesting difference between them is that a DFA always halts. Okay, you can tell that that's true just by looking at one drawn out. Every single state of a DFA is either a yes state or a no state. Okay, and both of those are potential halting states. So if you have a finite input that you're feeding into a DFA, and the DFA reads through it one symbol at a time, it's either going to end on a yes or end on a no. Basically, it has one state transition for each symbol that it reads. But as we've talked about in previous lessons, a Turing machine sometimes halts and sometimes does not halt. It can be possible for it to go into an infinite loop. And the question of whether it halts or not is an important problem called the halting problem. Okay, so that ought to do for this question. Let's move on to the next one. Let's get rid of that. Okay, briefly describe the main parts of a Turing machine. Okay, let me quickly draw one out for us just to look at really fast. Okay, so here's a very simple model of a Turing machine diagrammed out. Let's just label all of the parts now. So the first thing it has are states. Another thing it has is a state transition. Okay, and finally it has a memory tape. Okay, and then you could also say that another thing that Turing machine has is a read-write head. Basically, it selects one of the symbols to be initialized on. Okay, that's the basics for the different parts of a Turing machine. If you gave me, just the first three, I would accept that too. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so the next question asks, both DFAs and Turing machines can solve decision problems. What is a decision problem? Okay, this one is very simple. A decision problem just answers true or false based on its input. So that's why we say it has to decide something about it. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Okay, so this is the one that you probably wanted to go through in great detail. So let's spend some time actually thinking through this and traveling through each state and kind of reasoning through what it's telling us to do in each step. Okay, so I'll use this red dot to indicate our current position on the tape, and I'll use this red dot to indicate the current state that we're on. Okay, so we currently read an A, and the only state transition we have is this one, which says if you see a pound sign, replace it with a pound sign. Okay, what do you do if you don't have a state transition that you're allowed to follow? Because we're not allowed to follow this one. So in that case, you just default to the instruction that's given here. It says go to the left. Basically, go to the left and ignore the symbol. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go to the left. Okay, going to the left, we see a pound sign. Okay, now we can follow that state transition. So it says replace the pound sign with the pound sign. Okay, so we just leave it alone. And then immediately we go to the right. Okay, and let me erase the old dots there. Okay, so now our state transition diagram looks like this. Okay, so now we have a state transition that allows us to see an A and replace it with an A. Okay, so we are forced to follow that one. Okay, so we see this A and we replace it with an A, and then immediately we go to the right. Okay, so now we're here on the tape. Okay, let me erase the old symbols. There we go. Okay, so now what do we do here? We follow the state transition. We see an A, and we replace it with an X. And then we immediately go to the right again. So let's do that. We see an A, and we replace it with an X. And then it tells us to go back to the right. Okay, so we're there again. Okay, and there's the dot moved one over to the right. Okay, what should happen now? Well, we see a B. Do we have any state transitions that allow us to do something if we see a B? We only have these two. So the answer is no. Instead, we just have to follow the basic instructions that are given here. That's the default. So it just says to go to the right. Okay, we go to the right, we see a B. So we'll follow that instruction again, we go to the right. Okay, and now we're here. We see an A, and we can follow the state transition. If you see an A, you replace it with an X. Okay, and when you do that, you then go to the right. Okay, and here's our new state and our new position. Okay, so now we see a pound sign. So we can follow the state transition. So we replace pound sign with pound sign, and then we halt. Okay, and what's left on the tape? The tape says this now. It says A, X, B, B, X. Okay, so it must have simply just like deleted all of the A's after the first one. So that's what that Turing machine did. Okay, and let me type that in. Okay, good. It says that AXBBX is what we should have gotten. Okay, let's go to the next problem, and let's work through this one. Okay, so yeah, when you're doing these on your own, you should draw the Turing machine if it's a complicated one, and draw the tape symbols as well, and follow along with your pencil in the same way that I'm doing. Okay, here are the two dots to indicate our position. And it says, there's nothing to do if you don't see a pound sign. So instead, we just go to the left. Okay, so we're here again, and we do see a pound sign. So we can follow that state transition. And now we're here, and it tells us to go immediately to the right along the tape. Okay, so here's our new position. What do we do now? If you see a B, replace it with a B. So we can follow this state transition, and we wind up here, and we're told to go to the right again along the tape. Okay, now what? Well, it doesn't say what we do if we happen to see an A on the tape. So instead, we'll just go to the right. Okay, but what happens if you see a B? If you see a B, replace it with an X. And then go to the right again. Okay, same logic here. We see a B, we replace it with an X, and then we go to the right. Okay, now we're here on the tape. We see an A. What do we do? Well, we don't have any state transitions for that. So if you see any other symbol, you just follow the default instructions, which are stated here. You go to the right. Okay, now what? We see a pound sign. So if we see a pound sign, we can replace it with the pound sign. Okay, and then after following that state transition, we land here, which says that we halt. Okay, what does the tape say altogether? So it should say B, A, X, X, A. So basically this one just deleted all of the B's after the first one. Okay, let's type that in and see if that's correct. All right, good. Let's move on to the last problem. Oops, just kidding, there was one more. Okay, let's actually write it out. Okay, so we see an A, and we don't have a state transition for that, so we just go to the left. Okay, now we're there. Okay, what now? Now we see the pound sign, so we can advance to the right after following that transition. Okay, so now we're set up here. So we see an A, and we'll follow this state transition, and then we'll immediately go to the right. We see an A, replace it with an A, and now we're here. Okay, now what? We see an A, and the state transition says replace that A with an X, and then go to the right again. So we go to the right after replacing that with an X. Okay, now we see a B. What do we do? Well, are no state transitions for B's, so we just follow the default instruction of going to the right. Okay, and by this point, I think you might get it now, so let's just jump to the chase. That one's going to be replaced by an X, and then we go to the right. This one's going to be replaced by an X, and then we go to the right. We ignored this one and go to the right, and then we see a pound sign. So then we halt, and now we're here. Okay, so that's the final kind of status of our Turing machine tape. And what does it say? It says A, X, B, X, X, B. Okay, let's put that in and see if we get that correct. Okay, good. All right, now on to the final problem. Okay, I really would recommend taking a bit of scratch paper and drawing this out. Draw it out along with the tape that's at the bottom so that you can follow through it bit by bit. Okay, so let's get organized here. This is the starting state, and this is the starting symbol on the tape. So right now we see a B, and the only state transition we have is this one. And that one only lets us follow it if we see a pound. So we're not going to follow that one. Instead, we just default to going left. Okay, and then after going left, now we're here, and we read a pound sign, and now we can follow the state transition, and then we land here, which tells us immediately to go to the right again. Okay, so now we read a B. These two, or actually three state transitions don't have an option for that, so we can't follow any of them. Instead, we're just going to go to the right. Okay, now we read an A. So we can follow this state transition, which tells us to go to the right again. Okay, here we are now. It says if you see a B, you can replace it with an X, and then immediately go to the left. Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to replace this with an X, and then immediately go to the left. Okay, now we see an A. Let's see, there's nothing to do if we see an A. That one says if you see a pound, replace it with a B. So if we see no state transition that we can follow, we just keep going to the left. Okay, there's one move to the left. We see a B, which isn't the same thing as if you see a pound, so we don't follow that one. Instead, we go to the left again. Okay, now we're here. We do see a pound. And it says if you see a pound, replace it with a B. Okay, so that's what we do. And then we go to the left again. Okay, and now we're there. Okay, we see a state transition that says if you see a pound, replace it with a pound, and then go to the right. Okay, so there we are now. And there are no state transitions for if we see a B. So instead, we're just going to go to the right again. Okay, once again, we're here and we see a B. So we're going to go to the right one more time. Okay, now we see an A. It says if you see an A, replace it with an A, and then go to the right. Okay, there we are. We see an X, which has no state transition associated with it. So instead, we just go to the right. Okay, now we see a B. It says if you see a B, you can replace it with an X, and then go to the left. Okay, so let's do that. So if you see a B, replace it with an X, and then go to the left. There we are. Okay, now we're going to continually go to the left until we see a pound sign because there's nothing else to do. So that'll take us all the way over here. Okay, now we can follow the state transition. If you see a pound sign, replace it with a B, and then go to the left again. Okay, and there we are, just acting out that. And now it says if you see a pound sign, replace it with a pound sign, and then go to the right. Okay, there are no state transitions for B's, so instead we're just going to go to the right until we see an A. Okay, and there's a state transition for if you see an A, replace it with an A, and then go to the right. Okay, so now we're currently here. There are no state transitions for what happens if you see an X. So instead we're just going to go to the right. Okay, and we go to the right again. Okay, and we see an A. Let's see, there are no state transitions for what happens if you read an A from this position here. So instead we go to the right again. Okay, now we're here. We see a pound sign. Okay, if you see a pound sign, it says that you can replace it with the pound sign and then go to the left. Okay, now we're here. This one says if you see an A, replace it with a pound sign and go to the left. Or if you see an X, replace it with a pound sign and then go to the left. Okay, so let's follow that instruction. We see an A, we replace it with a pound sign. Okay, and then we go to the left. Now this says if you see an X, replace it with a pound sign and go to the left. Okay, let's do that. Replace it with a pound sign and then go to the left. Okay, and we'll follow that same state transition one more time. See an X, replace it with a pound sign. Okay, and then go to the left. Okay, now what? It says if you see an A, replace it with a pound sign. And then go to the left. Okay, so now we're there. So we currently are at this state, or this symbol on the tape which says B. But we don't have any state transitions for if we see a B. So what do? Just by default, we ignore the symbol and we go to the left. Okay, ignore the symbol and go to the left. See a B, ignore the symbol, go to the left. Okay, and now we're here. It says if you see a pound sign, you can replace it with a pound sign and then follow the state transition, which says to halt. Okay, and that's what we do. This gets replaced with a pound sign and we stop. What's left on the tape? Ignoring all of the pound signs, it's just going to be B, B, B. Okay, what did this Turing machine do? Well, the original tape had A's and B's that were all jumbled together. It looks like what this did was it deleted every A, and then it just moved together all of the B's so that they were next to each other in a sequence. So a lot of complicated machinery just to do that. So our last thing on the tape was this. It said B, B, B. Okay, let's type that in and see that it's correct. Okay, great. Okay, so that'll do it for this review. I hope you found that helpful. If you do have any questions, please message me and I'll try to get back to you on that. All right, thank you for watching.